Did you see this coming?
Yes, I think that the problems of the Cypriot banking system have been pretty clear for a while. They are uniquely badly affected by what's going on because, of course, they're very heavily dependent on Greece themselves, and they have, in the Eurozone, probably an overvalued exchange rate, and they have really made a living on being a centre for offshore money, particularly Russian money. And this was a very risky strategy for them to pursue.
When you look at this strategy, I was struck by the criticisms this week in The Economist magazine with a lengthy article, many other op-ed pieces saying this is a bad deal. Is the deal by itself bad, or is the Cyprus deal bad because it didn't go far enough?
I think it is a dangerous deal because the principle of all previous deals is that small depositors have been fully protected. Now, in the middle of the crisis, the European Union increased the level of depositor protection to 100,000 euros across the board. This was much higher. I mean, it was 3 times as high as we had in the UK before. And I've always thought that this was a dangerous hostage to fortune because you were then implying that pretty much all deposits were guaranteed in the banking system. And it turns out in Cyprus, because there are so few bondholders, that it just isn't possible to do a deal without hitting depositors in some way. Now, my own view is that what they should have done was to establish a lower tranche that would be completely protected, because I think what is really unjustifiable is to levy a tax on people who may just have transactions balances in their banks. I think that's really tough. So I think what they've done is made a mistake in taking this 100,000 number. I think they should have said we guarantee everything up to 30,000 or something like that, and then a graduated tax thereafter. And I suspect that we're not going to see that this isn't over. I think that this deal is going to be revised.
But, Sir Howard, what does it say about the stability of bank deposits in bigger places like Spain?
Well, yes, there's a big question mark over that. And I think it's a very high risk for the European authorities to have taken this. So far, the early signs this morning, but maybe most Spaniards haven't got up yet, are that they're not reacting in a panicky way. But clearly, it is going to mean that if there has to be another deal done for Portugal, for example, who may not be able to meet the terms of their original deal, or another one in Greece, then people are going to be extremely nervous. So I suspect it may not happen this week, but I think if there's any chance of a further deal being done for any other countries, people are going to be rushing to take their money out of the bank.
Sir Howard, the IMF was intimately involved in this agreement of Friday night and early Saturday morning. A lot of Americans would suggest that the IMF is just a conduit for American taxpayer money. Is the IMF and the American taxpayer actually coming to a partial rescue of Cyprus?
The IMF have been a little bit coy about just how much they are in for in this deal, but I think it's clear that they will be in for it to some extent. But I think probably more important than the IMF's actual money is the fact that the IMF does, in Europe, still have a reputation as something of an honest broker. Many small European countries are now deeply suspicious of the European Commission. They're deeply suspicious of the Germans. They think that the ECB is under too much influence from the Germans and from politicians. So the IMF, in fact, is seen as the one honest woman in the piece, really. So I think it's important that the IMF continues to be engaged.
Sir Howard, let me bring in Indira Lakshmanan. She's our senior diplomatic correspondent, our guest host this morning, folks. Indira?
Sir Howard, I'm interested in the whole question of the German role in this. We've been reading a lot that the Germans were the ones behind the scenes pressuring for this deal. Of course, the Germans have their elections coming up in September. And I mean, I'm struck by the interim Italian Prime Minister Mario Monti, who once said that for the Germans, economics is a moral science, and that they see that good things come to those who save and behave in, austere ways. So I'm wondering about the negative externalities of that and who's reasoning with the Germans about the possible spillover effects to other economies in the Eurozone.
Well, you say you want to speculate about the German role. I wonder if there was a role for anybody else at all in this deal. I think this is a German deal. This is made in Berlin. And it was particularly sensitive to the Germans, one, because every time they are engaged in a bailout, they tell their electors it's the last time, it's unique, etc. And of course, we've had quite a lot of unique deals. And secondly, this one offends because they were dealing with a lot of hot money, hot Russian money. I think if you haven't been to Cyprus, you don't quite understand just how much it's a Russian place. I was in Limassol recently, and all the signs are in Russian. You know, you need to know the Cyrillic alphabet to understand what's going on there. It is an extraordinary situation, and I think enough Germans have been there to know that they were dealing with a kind of offshoot of some quite undesirable Russians, and that simply they were not prepared to bail that out. Mrs. Merkel was not prepared to go to her electors and say that they were putting serious money behind that.
That's fabulous color. Howard Davies.